One's on.
Then we had a controversial decision.
Are we gonna get into this?
Yeah, we're gonna get into this one. So we had the co-main, which honestly, after watching the fight, I don't know why it was the co-main. In my opinion, wasn't a bad fight, but whatever. So we had Ketlen Vieira against Yana Kunitskaya. That went decision 29-28 across the board from all three judges. I don't know which fight they were watching. I thought it was a pretty clear round 1, round 3 for Vieira, and round 2 for Kunitskaya.
That's what I had it at as well.
Looking at the numbers now, total strikes 35 for Vieira and 7 significant strikes total. And then you look at Yana, you have 215 total strikes and 47 significant strikes. If you just look at that two alone, those two alone, you're probably like, oh, well, Yana murked her.
Oh, give her all 3 rounds at that point. Why not?
Then you work down. You have control time. You have 8 minutes, 40 seconds for Vieira. You have still decent amount of time for Yana at 5 minutes, 10 seconds, but you still have 3.5 minutes more for Vieira.
3 takedowns.
3 takedowns out of 8. Not a great percentage, but not bad. And then no takedown attempts at all for Kunitskaya. And somehow we get, and we should also say how that fight ended. So the third round, you had about, I would say it was like at least 3.5 to 4 minutes of control for Vieira. Like, not necessarily too much happening, but she was controlling Yana. And then just the last minute, Yana flipped the script.
I don't even think it was the last minute, man.
Maybe the last 30
20,
seconds, something like
30
that.
seconds. Yeah.
And Yana ended up on top, which is why you always will hear the commentators saying, make sure you end the round not on the bottom, even regardless of how that round's looking. So Vieira ended up on the bottom, and she was eating shots, and they were good shots, and she ended up busted open from one of those elbows.
That's where half of those significant strikes came from, Matt, because otherwise that number would have been way, way lower.
Yeah, and as soon as she stands up, she stood up. I'm like, I mean, not a great ending for her, but I figured, she took that round.
Yeah.
And then she stands up, I'm like, oh, her face is absolutely hammered. I'm like, now I'm a little bit worried about what the outcome will be. And then 29-28 across the board, they gave it to Yana.
I mean, this is another weird one for me because I took Yana as my pick.
I did as well.
Just looking at her record, looking at her past fights, looking at Vieira's past fights, I thought it was a shoo-in. And then we go into that first round, and Vieira just dominated her on the ground, dude. And it kind of changed my opinion on it. So we watched the second round then, where Kunitskaya arguably put up, her performance. The majority of her performance was done in that second round, I think, at least.
I thought it was a clear 19-19 going.
Well, that's where she got that control time.
Yeah,
it wasn't in the first round, and it definitely wasn't in the third round. So, and on another note, the total strikes 215 here. Okay, yeah, there's a strike, and then there's a strike. If your strike is this, I don't. How do you judge that?
Her significant strikes versus total strikes, 22% of those strikes were significant.
Yeah, no, dude. I'm sorry, man. Like, to me, fine. You're looking at strikes. You're looking at significant strikes. That's okay. But when a strike is basically you, the equivalent of you bashing on a teddy bear, or the equivalent of you, like, that you're swinging your pom poms around. You know what I mean? That's not a strike. I'm sorry. Significance were the types of strikes we saw in the last 27.
Yes, and they were hammered.
Those were
strikes. They were her husband's. Her husband looked like was working. Thiago Santos hammers.
Yep.
I saw Santos in her eyes as those hammers are coming down.
If she had performed that way throughout the first and the second round, I can see you giving Yana the fight.
Yeah,
but that's not what was happening. What was happening was Vieira was completely dominating her, and yeah, maybe there were no submissions that came of this, but there were attempts that were being made. There was movement on the ground. And for people that are watching this kind of thing and thinking like, oh, there's no action, there's nothing happening. Like, why do the judges give credence to ground control? Well, because it's mixed martial arts, man. If you wanted to watch boxing, you would watch boxing.
Yeah.
So to sit there and say that, I'm glad. And there were some hot takes out there on Twitter, man, on Reddit. It was I had a stake in this, so I'm biased for sure.
We'll talk about that too.
Yeah, but it was genuinely like upsetting to watch these takes. People saying that they shouldn't give as much.
Well, the ESPN crew right after the fight,
immediately after, it looked like a justification, man, because you knew it was a bad call. You knew that it shouldn't have been scored that way. It makes no sense.
And the judges scored it. 2 judges scored it 10-9 for Vieira the first round. One, I don't know which fight this guy was watching, gave the first round to Yana. All three gave the second round to Yana, which
Makes
we both
sense.
agree with. And then the third round, the first judge that gave the first round to Vieira gave the last round to Vieira, which was weird. And then the other two judges gave that final round to Yana, which again, the only thing that makes sense to me is the way it ended. And also she busted her up pretty bad. When she stood up, that was the first thing I thought. I'm like, her eye is absolutely jacked up. Watch some bullshit decision end up happening now because of how that looks. And that's what ended up happening.
I mean, we can go down this road, but like people that know way better than me have said way more about it. But to me, it's kind of like, look, if you're a judge and you're coming into this sport and you don't really watch this sport, you don't know. Like, I'm sure you do know, but at the same time, you see something like that, and that's what makes your decision for you. You see some lady get her eye busted open in the last 20 seconds, and you think that, okay, the round went to the other lady. Come on. You know, you go back to judging school or whatever else, whatever they do, man. You need to retake your certification test.
Looks like they went to clown college.
Yeah, exactly, man. It is frustrating because I get it. I get people want to see action. I get that people don't like seeing they don't like seeing the jiu-jitsu. They don't like seeing the grappling.
Yeah, it's not as, especially like if you're, again, like you were mentioning, if you're a fan of the sport, if you're a true fan of actual mixed martial arts where you're comfortable seeing the fight on the ground, you're comfortable seeing the
Minner fight.
Yeah. Which we'll discuss too. Like if you're cool seeing things happening look, if it's on the ground, they're literally just on top of each other, not moving. I don't like that either.
Yeah, break it up.
But if you look at guys like Khabib, when he's on the ground, that thing's like poetry in motion. Correct. This guy is so fluid. Like he's
like a snake.
Yeah, seriously. He's in side control on one side, and in half a second, he's already switched onto the other side, and now he's got your legs tied up, and now all of a sudden you're on your stomach, he's on your back, and you're tapping out. It just happens like this. And the same way Minner was performing beautifully too. We'll get into detail of that, but same thing like that. You look at that, it's like, it's interesting to watch that. I can understand too if it's just how some of Blade's fights, frankly, have been, where he just takes the guy down. Like his last fight, I can't remember off the top of my head who was fighting, but it was like that. I was like, oh my gosh, shoot me now. This is so boring. He was just sitting on him. Like that is understandable.
I mean, the clinch is
like or if they're like just hugging each other against the fence.
Well, see, and it's interesting that comes up because Yana, her last fight, basically worked the clinch. And I think that's how she took that last fight. She worked, I'm going to have to pull this up because I don't remember off the top of my head, but I remember watching the highlights of that fight, and that was all that fight was. It was up in the clinch. Yana was just controlling the other fighter, and that's kind of what gave me the opinion that I had going into this fight was that, okay, she's going to execute that same strategy because Vieira's excellent on the ground, especially watching her last fight. Vieira showed that she's got that ground game and that standing game too.
Yeah, Yana fought Julia Stoliarenko, something like that.
Yeah. That fight was all clinch. It was all up on the cage. And we didn't see that this fight, thankfully, because
she was on her back the whole fight.
Well,
half the fight she was on her back.
I'd rather that because we can watch Vieira seeking those submissions, you know, versus what is this? This hug fest over here, and nothing's gonna happen there. No leg stomps, no foot stomp, nothing. It's just no knees. Let's just hang out up here on the cage. Yeah. That's boring to me. But when you're on the ground and you're looking for submission attempts, to say that that's not MMA or not, that's not MMA, that's not fighting or that's not entertaining, I don't know what to tell you, dude. You might want to watch a different sport.
Yeah, that's probably who they would call casuals.
That normies,
yeah. Because we should preface too, we've only really gone into it the last. For me, I started watching it once pandemic hit, and it wasn't because I didn't like the UFC before. I watched some events. Like I was more of a casual fan then. It was pretty much big name, gather up with some of the friends and watch the event. That's why, like, I still don't claim I know that much about sports. I don't. But given what we've seen, like pretty much since like May, June, July, like you get way more into it now. It's like since we watch it so much, it's like I'm still not watching because I'm like, oh, knock him out. It's like knock him out if it's a sick fight. Like if it's a cool fight and you knock him out. Like there was like what 5 knockouts I think opened up the card. You had 5 straight KOs or TKOs, and some of them were cool knockouts and all. But I prefer seeing a longer fight. Yeah. I'm not saying let it go to the decision, but at least a little bit of time. If everything's a first round knockout, it's like, well, cool, but like there wasn't a fight. Unless you would like really went ham.
I mean, I guess it completely depends. Like you remember that Buckley knockout, that spinning leg.
Yeah, that was nuts.
That was nuts, right? And if I remember correctly, that was in the first round. Was it
maybe
first
or
second round? Yeah. In any case, seeing something like that, even if it's in the first 10, 15 seconds, Yeah, like I
That's
want to
different.
see a longer
Yeah.
fight, but that's
different. Yeah.
That's something where it's 1 in a million. You're never gonna see something like that again. Chances are.
Yeah.
You know, so I agree with you, but at the same time, there are those, you know,
Yeah,
1
there's
minute
anomalies,
knockouts where you're
yeah.
like, Jesus, that was ridiculous.
Well, I mean, there was a couple in this card that were pretty brutal. So that again, Lewis so far at this one, we have Lewis at plus 325 that hit. You had Kunitskaya at plus 220 hit. And then right before that, you had another dog hit at plus 155, Derek Minner, which was a great fight
Loved
too.
I loved watching that.
So you guys had a parlay out. You had, which was absolute robbery because of that, the ruling on that Vieira fight. So you guys had Dawkins, Minner, Vieira, and Derek Lewis. With a pretty, like a 10-1 payout pretty much.
It was 25 to win. I think it was 538 or something.
Oh, sorry. So more than that, 20-1 payout. Yeah, something like that. That's right. Yeah. It was 25 for something like that. And that didn't happen.
No. Because
of the judges, to be frank. Because again, I had picked, when I asked you, I'm like, send me over your picks. I sent you over my picks. We both had picked Yana. This was just like without any Mountain Dew on the line. Yeah. It was just strictly, who do you think's going to win? I thought it was going to be Yana. You thought it was going to be Yana.
Well, she looked like the better fighter.
Objectively, well, as objective as it can be given our knowledge, it seemed very clearly that Vieira won the fight.
Objectively, even though I think Yana is the better fighter, based on the last 2 fights that I saw both fighters fighting, I think that match was Vieira's. Yeah. And